Hi everyone and welcome. So pleased you could join us. Today we're going to be bringing you a customer case study concerning Shelterbox's implementation of Blackbaud CRM. But first, some introductions are probably in order. I'm Alison Davis from Blackbaud, and I was the lead consultant on the Shelterbox's Blackbaud CRM implementation project.
Hi, I'm Will Kemp. I'm a project manager at Shelterbox and I led the implementation of CRM with Blackbaud.
So Will, probably a good place to start, I think, is perhaps why you and the team at Shelterbox felt you needed a new CRM system.
So the old CRM we had was about 10 years old. We had bid for an earlier version of Shelterbox. So in the last 10 years, we've grown quite a lot and changed quite a lot. And the business didn't really invest in the previous CRM in the same way that the business has obviously evolved. And that meant that it was considered a bit of a poor product for the sort of the modern CRM, the modern shelters. And a lot of people weren't using it in a consistent way, and some people were using it every day as they should, but many people just weren't using it at all and had to find other ways of managing their data and so on. So it was time that we started a project to either rebuild the current CRM to meet all our needs or look elsewhere for another CRM. One of the other problems we had was there's a big program we're running called the automation program, where we're looking at how we can automate a lot of the deployments we do and provide some apps to help with the managing volunteers and so on. All that's being built in a low-code platform. And the earlier CRM didn't really have all the features and the sort of ability to integrate very well with that platform. So that's another reason we started to look elsewhere and kicked off this project.
Okay, cool. So once you'd actually decided a new system was what you needed, what made you choose Blackbaud CRM?
Well, we went through quite a long tender process. We were very aware that you were market leaders in the not-for-profit CRMs, and we were really looking for an off-the-shelf product. We really didn't want to get into a big development project for a CRM. We didn't feel we needed any special customizations, or we had any unusual fundraising techniques which warranted that sort of development. So your product really sort of fitted our needs and our requirements. Good integration, as I mentioned before, that was something we were really looking for. And we really wanted to sort of internationalize the CRM. We have a lot of affiliates and a lot of international teams that are really important to us, and we really want to sort of help. And we saw that potentially the CRM could help with those teams. So that was a big sort of driver for this change. And you had a very good roadmap. We wanted to future-proof. We really didn't want to do this project again in a couple of years. So that led us sort of down the path towards you.
Sure, okay. So thinking back now, from the first impressions perhaps you had of us compared with what you now know of us a couple of years in, what would your thinking be?
So when we first met, obviously you were a large, sort of very professional organisation, and for the tender and the sort of the sales pitch side, you did send down very senior team. We managed to get you down on numerous occasions, which was no mean feat because we were in deep dark Cornwall. So that kind of demonstrated a lot of sort of the value we sort of represented to you, which was good, and sort of reassuring that you were invested in sort of us as much as we wanted to invest in you. Once we went through the tender process, obviously we went into the discovery project. And that was that kind of gave us a taster of what it would be like to work with you in quite a nice, safe, sort of managed way. And it was good. Obviously, it's successful, but it also, thinking about it, there was a lot of sort of pressure we felt when we first started. It was quite intense. A lot of the work we were doing, sort of Alison and you and me and everyone were in the workshops for a long time, plowing through requirements and understanding how it was going to work. And the fact that it was quite intense was quite reassuring again, because we felt we were getting value for money. You knew what you were talking about, and there wasn't any sort of wasted time. Time was very precious throughout all of that work, and that meant a lot. And a lot of this project was about persuading Shelterbox that we needed a new CRM, and the CRM would be valuable, and these projects are big. So really help people see that it's a serious piece of work.
Yeah, absolutely. I can honestly say it was no hardship for us to come to Truro.
Yeah, it's a long way. It's a very long way.
It is a long way. It's
it was good.
Yeah, but I agree with you. The discovery process is helpful from my perspective as well, in as much as once we start design, there's already an understanding built up between us, and there's the knowledge of the way we both work and of how you work as an organisation, which saves time, as you say, rather than having to do that as part of the beginning of the design phase of the project. So yes, I'd agree with you there as well. So again, thinking back over the course of the project, clearly there are times when, you know, there are highs and lows. For you personally, what would you say those highs and lows were?
So it's a long project. You know, it started around 2 years ago, and I've been talking to the team about highs and lows. And the one that we keep coming back to isn't particularly exciting, but it was around the data conversion. And I think the first pass of all the data, because from my perspective and a lot of the project team, we were quite worried about the data, because that's one of the hardest pieces to get right, we felt. And we've seen it when it hasn't gone right before in previous sort of projects. So when we went through the test on one, which was the first kind of real, and I remember all of us were kind of looking for problems, and we were like, it can't be that good. We've either missed a team, or we've forgotten like half fundraising teams, or something has gone wrong, and it hadn't. And that was a really good point, not just because it meant that we were doing everything right, it meant that we could present back to the business that this is on track and this is going really well. And it gave everyone a real boost to really, because I think it was around halfway through, I think probably over halfway through, sort of heading for go live. And that was a really good sort of high point. I think the SMEs, so the subject matter experts, engaged really well with the project as well. That was a really good high. It's quite a difficult project to get everyone behind, as I'm kind of sort of alluding to. But I think once we started to demonstrate how actually this CRM could help, and how a CRM, and you know, but throughout this project we reviewed all the processes everyone went through, and how by sort of showing people how their work can be improved, and the opportunities, if we get this right, that kind of pushed them to really evolve. So the engagement for business was great, and I think that kind of worked we worked together, where you and your team would make sure that technically everything is being delivered and training is on tap for getting prepared for go live and so on, and training us on how the system works and how we need to configure it, and then how we were able to do the sort of the softer side of the project, to look at changing the organization and making sure people were a part of this and really were engaged with it, and the process change and all of that. So that was good. That was very good.
And I agree with you. TR1 is an important part of the project, because it's the first opportunity for the SMEs and the wider project team to see your data in our configuration, and it suddenly brings everything into focus and makes it real, I think. So it's a very useful part of the project, and to have the data right at that point, yes, is a big boost. I agree.
Yeah, no, that was great. On the lower sides, I think the lower points, I think the volume of work for the SMEs was a bit of a concern, and in hindsight, I don't know how you really resolve that, because generally, the project went really well. So it's a high project. Everyone's really pleased with it. But the model we took, where the SMEs would be responsible for redesigning their processes, data conversion, and they were there as the sort of consultants for that. So we needed their time a lot, and obviously we supported them, but we needed their time. But they all had day jobs, and they all, and however much their management would agree to an amount of time for them for this project, we didn't, as a business, reduce fundraising targets. We didn't reduce how much, engagement they needed to do with the supporters or the campaigns, or how reactive they had to be to natural disasters, for example. Yeah. So that we managed it, but the concerns was the stress that people would come under for no fault of anyone's. And that's just something that, I don't know how we would have done it any differently. Based on the resources you have for these sort of projects. But that's something that was quite difficult, I think, at moments, and it's just to do with stress. And just making sure that's managed.
Yeah. Well, as you say, it is a long project, and there are always stressful moments. And there's a point that I often see in the project where the full realization of the amount of work that's involved sort of hits home. And I'm very aware that a lot of the time I'm asking people to sort of press the I believe button. I've seen this before, we will get there, it is okay. And I think Shelterbox were a great example of how to actually spread that load really effectively. It's a mistake if, too few people think, well, we'll take ownership of this part of the project. It needs that buy-in as well, I think, from the wider team, that the more they're involved, the more they take ownership. So from a change management point of view, as much as anything, it's really important to involve as many people in the project as you possibly can, and not just leave a couple of people responsible, I think. Yeah. So thinking back now, going back to, you at the start of this project, with all that you now know, what 3 pieces of advice would you give yourself?
Okay, so getting it down to 3 was actually quite tricky. There's lots of things I'd probably do slightly differently, as you always would, but I think the 3 main things I would sort of suggest people really focus on is, first of all, it's about the people, without a doubt. It's all about getting the right people. You spoke to us quite a lot about typically how these projects pan out and the type of roles involved, and we have at Shelterbox the right people. So we have the technical ability, we also had analysts, and we also have the support from senior staff at director level, who really backed this project all the way. So we managed to get the right people to be in the right roles from the start, and that hasn't changed at all. And thankfully your team has not changed as well. So we're all still working together. We still have that same relationship, and we know how we all work. So that's meant it's really easy. And also the culture around those people is it's definitely okay to get things wrong. And it's okay to ask questions. And if things do go wrong, it's about a can-do attitude. Let's solve those problems. We didn't really come up against many sort of blockers that we couldn't just sit down and resolve. Yeah. And we didn't have to involve any serious decision makers in anything we really had to do, because we were able just to solve these problems as a small group, and that meant that we could progress really, really well without any real sort of issues. I don't think that can be solved. So yeah, it's really about the right people and a very supportive team. And it's not always easy to get that, because you have different personalities, and in some of these projects you have different egos as well, and that's something just to sort of manage, I think. But we, obviously this happens many times before, but I think we got it right within our teams. Secondly, I think what we did quite early on is we removed a lot of bureaucracy and decision making, or enabled decision making, and that's something I think many of us experience in the past. Decisions need to go right up to the top for pretty much everything, and some of the people at the top need to feel they need to be involved in everything. And we got that agreement from the start that unless there's any major issues that could impact the objectives of the project, most of the decisions can come down to the project team level, and we push those decisions or offer those decisions maybe to the SMEs. So that meant that they were best placed to then redesign processes, really understand how they work, start to understand their data and take everything apart. It was a lot of work for them, but they suddenly became accountable, or more accountable, for their business area and their sort of work. And that, I think, really sped up decision making. Again, we made it clear that it's okay to get it wrong.
Yeah.
You know, we're all learning, and like, apart from you guys, none of us have really used Blackboard before, so you can't expect us all to be professionals.
Sure.
If you know, it should get picked up in testing. If it doesn't get picked up in testing, then that's our fault for not testing it properly. And, you know, nothing apart from some key areas which help us identify, and we kind of know places not to get wrong. Pretty much all of it we left to the SMEs to really decide how it worked, and that made everything happen quickly. That was fast. I think that helped progress. And then finally, I think is to keep it simple. Keep it really, really simple, and don't be afraid to de-scope. And I think when we started the project, there was a lot of ambition to do new things, you know, we'd never done with fundraising, and there's a whole toolkit of things we can do. And you know, Blackboard is a huge system, and it's kind of endless what we can really do with it when we start to plug in, you know, our low-code platform and so on. But we had to kind of rein it in a bit and just say, we only really need to deliver what we need to deliver at that time. You know, otherwise it's going to get complicated. And I think that meant when we hit go live, we didn't really have many problems, and you know, the change wasn't gigantic for everyone doing their day job. They kind of slipped to a new way of working.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd agree with you. I think fostering the partnership approach is really valuable for both sides. You know, do away with any kind of blame culture. Don't have huge postmortems as to why you've got to a certain position, and just say, okay, we are where we are. This is the problem. What do we do to fix it between us? And I think that's something that worked particularly well on this project, that we were able to take that attitude and that approach, and it makes life a lot easier for both sides, I think, in that case. Yeah. So I'm really happy that, you know, you do see the project as having been a success. That's fantastic. When do you think you first sort of saw that as being the result, and how do you measure now perhaps that it has been a success?
I think we've talked about this quite a few times of how we're sort of measuring it, and when the moment we realised it was going well. And there's a big standout moment when the head of support or care suddenly announced, I'm going to put the care back into support care. And that came about when we'd spent a long time going through the support care processes, and they were taking 2 to 3 days to import all these different data sources, from Facebook to online donations to postal, and all the other information collected from supporters. So it's a huge sort of administrative task. And after all of the processes had been reviewed, and we took them all into Blackboard and looked at how we can automate them, processes came down to around 20 minutes. So that was a big sort of moment for everyone, and that obviously helped really get buy-in for the project, and everyone suddenly realised this is a very good tool and this is a big game changer. But Phil really felt that his team could now move away from doing all these tasks and seeing supporters as donors or numbers, to actually really engaging with them again, and in that relationship, real personal relationship built up between our supporters and volunteers and so on. So that was a really big moment. Another sort of real positive impact is around individual giving team. It's a good example, because they originally, for them to run campaigns and appeals and manage segments and ask ladders and so on, that involved that team. It involved IT, quite a lot of our IT team, and then some third parties as well. So it's a long process, quite complex, and actually had quite a lot of cost to it, apart from time, actual sort of financial cost to it. And we went through that process again, and then pulled it all into Blackboard, and now the RG team own all of those processes. There's no third parties involved. IT are there to support from a sort of a data analysis and a sort of querying perspective, but otherwise they own that. And that's meant that apart from understanding the data and being a lot more sort of effective when it comes to and efficient when it comes to campaigning, they're really now pushing for how they can do it better. And that's kind of what we wanted to do. You know, they need to realise the benefits of the system. It can't be IT to realise the benefits of the system. It has to come from the users themselves.
Yes.
And coming from that as well, the data-driven decision making was a big push for this. Is really starting to happen because all the teams now have access to the query builder. Which is that reasonably simple tool. I say that, but other people who use it may say differently. But it's a tool that people are using to query all the data, and a lot of the teams are now doing that. And those teams before wouldn't have gone near the data and would have just relied on IT to deal with it. So allowing people to actually use that tool and start to really make decisions on data is really important. And they're also finding out where gaps in data are and forming ownership of that. And we've seen the quality of data increase quite a lot from each of the teams because they're starting to say where the gaps are.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? If you're going to rely on the analysis, then you want to make sure the quality of the data going in is good to begin with. Yeah, so it's a self-healing thing, isn't it? But yeah, I remember that comment very clearly. It was, I think, the second afternoon of Go Live, and I've had occasions in the past where people sometimes are concerned about just how much time is saved by some things in CRM and what that means in terms of their role. And when Phil was teased with, you know, what are you going to do with all your time now? He came out with that just amazing quote, which, yeah, I still enjoy that very much. And I think personally for me, one of the results of this whole project has been just such admiration for the work that Shelterbox does and the people that make that happen, to the extent that I'm now one of your regular givers, as you know.
Yeah, good.
So I think that just about wraps it up for us today. So thanks very much for joining us, and especially a big thank you to Will for wonderful advice and insight. And if any of you have any questions, then please visit the Blackbaud Hub during Chase Live, or you can email us on solutions@blackbaud.co.uk, or visit us on Twitter at Blackbaud Europe. Thank you very much.